Good evening. It is Wednesday, May 10th, 2017. The time is 7:13. This is the Plan Commission of the City of Evanston. I'm Jim Ford. We have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order. We're having technical difficulties tonight, so those of you who are watching remotely may or may not be able to see the screen. We apologize, Bill. We're doing the best we can. You have the agenda in front of you. Are there additions or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will stand as presented. You have the minutes of the meeting of March 22nd. Are there additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Pelosi, second. Saul. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Commissioners Belisle and Goddard are abstaining, not having been present at the meeting. All right. We have three zoning text amendments to come before us this evening. The first is a return from a prior discussion. Case number 17, PLND 0015, a zoning text amendment regarding the establishment of regulations for allowing the location of generators. Ms. Jones, you're going to lead us through this?
Yes, I will. All right, so just to give, again, a very brief general background on our generator regulations, generators are not actually referenced within the zoning ordinance. So staff uses regulations that are related to air conditioning equipment when we have to determine setbacks and screening requirements. So this leads staff to use sections and items 6-4-6-9, which is special regulations applicable to air conditioning equipment. So essentially, we've been regulating generators the same as air conditioning equipment. So at the March 8th Plan Commission meeting, we brought before a text amendment which essentially placed generators within the same regulations for air conditioning equipment. Over the course of discussion for that particular item, there were several different concerns and questions raised. The major points being actually regulating air conditioning units and generators the same way, despite them having some differences in how they actually operate. And then also accounting for possible nuisances that come from generator use. So staff went back through the research that we did looking at other communities. And I will correct myself. I think I stated at the previous meeting that Oak Park had the more stringent regulations. It's actually Wilmette. So we paid a lot of attention to those regulations and also talked with the building and inspection services manager and our electrical inspector who see the installation and actually do the checking once the installation has occurred of these generators, and got their feedback and suggestions. So before you this evening, we have the updated amendment, which consists of creating a new subsection that will be specific to generator use. So generally, this will have similar setback requirements as the air conditioning equipment, but will allow for the zoning administrator to reserve the right to require additional setbacks from neighboring properties, specifically for the portable generator units. And this is seen for both for all of the side yard setbacks, interior side yard, street side yard, rear yard, and in the front yard, it is still prohibited. In this new section, we are also adding a small portion that addresses testing of the permanent standby generators. So we are suggesting that the testing for those particular units are done Monday through Friday between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And the thought process here was that that's typically going to be a time when residents are not at home, so there is less likely to be some disturbance of those particular residents. Additionally, we are proposing to, as we did before, add generators to subsection 6-17-2-3, which provides for a scope of landscape guidelines in the Manual of Design Guidelines, and specifically addressing landscape elements. And also, we would be adding generators to the table that is within the allowable accessory uses and structures table within section 6-4-6-3. So we have the following standards for amendments, which include whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Comprehensive General Plan as adopted and amended from time to time by the City Council, whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of existing developments and the immediate vicinity of the subject property, whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties, and finally, the adequacy of public facilities and services. So that is that
Okay.
proposal.
Thank you. Since this is a public hearing, I will ask if there's any member of the public who wishes to present testimony. If none, then we will proceed to commission discussion. Questions for staff or comments from members of the commission? Commissioner Pelosi.
I just wanted to clarify, it's an accessory use to a primary structure. It's not, one can't just go in and build a generator. It has
Correct.
to be- okay.
Right.
Is your mic on?
It's not, sorry. I just wanted to clarify that it's an accessory use to a another type of occupancy or use. And I was just curious, also, second question is there any limitation on the size of the generator, or is that not?
We, in
Is that
the
not
in
likely
the
to-
zoning ordinance, we do not have any limitations on the size.
Okay.
The building code may have more specific size restrictions,
Okay.
but not within the zoning code. We don't have that regulation.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Belisle.
Not a, or my question goes more with the section 6-17-2-3 about landscaping. One of the concerns I think we brought up last time we talked about generators was the amount of heat that they can generate, and I'm just wondering if it's the same allowable materials that can be used as screens as for the air conditioning, and if there's any concern there from staff.
Generally, that would be the similar materials. In speaking with the building and inspection services manager, he did mention that for at least the larger developments, that he may at times request additional screening or special screening that would prohibit some of the nuisance or the safety concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, so that there is discretion for somebody to make a decision that the particular landscape elements are appropriate to the particular problem.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions? I'm a little concerned about this phrase, the zoning administrator reserves the right to require. Presumably, a portable generator is brought in when it's needed. What triggers a decision by the zoning administrator, and so there's an enforcement question here. And there's a question of standards. We have no idea here of what that additional setback might look like. That was a question.
Okay. Well, I guess addressing the setback question, we did leave it a little bit more open, and that's generally thinking of the varying lot sizes that we have within the city. If it's something that you would like for us to add, we can increase the setback or perhaps add additional language that addresses placement within the lot.
Well, what is it about a portable generator that leads you to want to have that discretion?
Mayor, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Scott Mangan, Planning and Zoning Administrator. I think the idea is with the portable generator, obviously there's more flexibility and the ability to place that. So it's being brought in for an event and it can move. If there is a complaint or issue with surrounding property, we'd be able to evaluate the site where it's being placed on and see if there are alternate locations on that site that might cause less of an impact to adjacent properties.
Is there something about portable generators that makes them more problematic than permanent generators?
As I understand it, they can be louder. I think it probably depends on the device itself, but.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I must say, as a general rule, I'm uncomfortable with a regulatory provision that doesn't give the property owner or whoever it is using the generator any guidelines as to what standards they may have to meet. I understand the argument that they may be noisier, that they can be moved, that you've got some flexibility that you don't have with a permanent one, but I'd sure feel more comfortable if we told the potential users, well, here are the sort of parameters that we're working with. One other, I guess, question with respect to the testing. There was a comment posted on the Evanston Now website to the effect that for someone who works a night shift, 10 to 1 may be prime sleeping time, and would it make more sense to move the testing hours later in the day? I just throw that out.
That can definitely be something we look at. I mean, if it's something that seems like it would be a greater concern or become a larger nuisance, we can definitely look at different times for that.
Is there any reason not to have the window larger? I mean, why you've chosen a 3-hour window? I don't know how long it takes to test a generator.
Not long.
Not long at all. Turn that, see if it works.
Yeah. Does the public now have something he wants to say?
My name is John D'Angelo. I'm an Evanstonian. I live at 735 Chicago Avenue, and the reason I'm interested is it's one of the determining factors on whether or not I purchase a home in Evanston. I can offer some issues that I can foresee with the way that it's currently written, and it depends on how that generator is meant to be used, either a permanent fixed generator or a portable generator. On the permanent fixed generator, there are superseding codes in NFPA 101 and others that if it's other than for a private residence, the testing has monthly, annual, and triannual testing. The triannual testing is 3-hour testing, which is 3 hours from full load to full load. So the test itself actually takes 4 hours of runtime on the generator. And I did not see in the limited review I had of the text where it specifies that the generators you're talking about are just for residential use as opposed for other types of use. On the portable generators, there's multiple uses of portable generators, including small battery-powered generators that are used by carpentry trades and others that make no noise at all. They're portable on purpose so that you can move them around, and I did not see where the text of the code distinguishes those that are meant to supplement house power that is disconnected from commercial and those that are used for other functions. As a point of fact, a lawnmower is really a generator. So there's all sizes. And I would, coming from places where there's much more generator use, such as the Gulf Coast for hurricane season, et cetera, the codes, depending on the size of the generator and its intended use, tend to be a little bit more specific, whether it's meant to be a permanent standby to supplement house during commercial power interruptions, a permanent standby to supplement key services on a house, a permanent standby for something other than a residential occupancy, and then there's multiple degrees of temporary. So I didn't really hope that's helpful.
That's helpful. I am intrigued at the idea that you would use a battery to power a generator to produce current to run carpentry tools. Why not just use the battery?
Well, it's bigger, and so you have more
Okay, it's
power
a
as
huge
opposed to-
battery running a small generator.
No, it's a huge battery that you plug your tool into.
Okay.
So, for example, modern tools now that have the rechargeable
Yeah.
batteries, you still have to charge those batteries, and you
Okay.
can use an electric, bigger battery so that you can pop the small battery into your tools.
Okay. Thank you. What's your pleasure, commissioners? Do we have enough questions here that we want to take another crack at this?
In terms of the length of the window of testing hours?
Well, certainly that. I mean, that seems to be a clear issue, that for this triennial testing, the window needs to be longer.
A couple of things. I mean, there are other codes such as NFPA that govern everything, right? I mean, but I thought the intent of the ordinance was just to identify the restrictions on setbacks and screening requirements for it. If there is an institution with a certain type of generator, with a certain type of occupancy, such as a nursing home or something that needs a larger window of testing, I think that would be a variance of some kind, I guess. Which is, Jim, I know you don't like that one provision in the, I forget where exactly you saw that, about the authority having go.
6-4, 6-10, each of the sub-paragraphs.
Yeah, so I imagine it's some of those special uses that would warrant requiring leaving that in there.
Does this provision apply, these provisions apply in every zoning district? The way it's drafted?
That would be the intention.
Okay.
And does this cover commercial as well as residential?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like there are two ways that we can go, and what, if I understand what Commissioner Pagozzi is saying, that are we going about this for just the location and the setbacks, or do we want to go what I would consider a step further in terms of complication for sure, but now that we know more about different types of generators and different commercial users versus residential, if we want to go that route, I think we probably have to send it back for a little more. But are we stepping on other codes' toes by doing that? And that's a question I want to pose to both commission and staff.
There's the National Electric Code, there's the International Electric Code, there's International Building Code, which all govern the parameters and the type and size and the type of fuel the thing uses. So this thing would get really, really long. I think the focus of this thing is just on setback and screening, and that, the other provisions in the other various codes take care of that. Now, the window of testing, obviously, if there's a type of generator and a type of use that needs a longer test, in a more sophisticated electrical system, then I think you'd have to maybe put a provision on that line, allowing, such durations of testing and to be allowed based on the hardship or the need.
Or the requirements of the manufacturer or something like that.
Well, if we open the window up, say from 10 to 3, gives you a 5-hour window.
And
I could do
as a condo resident who is home one day a week during those hours, there is plenty of other noise that happens with all the landscaping and
leaf blowers,
the moving and the leaf blowing of the whole block. So
Yeah.
I would certainly be comfortable with 10 and 3, and even if I had to sleep, unfortunately, you kind of have to put up with it.
Can we imagine a situation, and maybe this would be in a zoning district other than R1, 2, 3, where an 8-foot setback would be insufficient?
There might not be 8 feet of space. And, and
Exactly,
not even to install it, let alone to have the setback.
right. Well, now let's see. What are the setbacks? And what's the side yard setback in C1? It's not much more than 8 feet, is it?
It's not very big. Let's see.
Okay, so presumably, this would require a variance. Let ZBA deal with it.
so hard.
I think Commissioner Belisle's observation that if we go much beyond, that setback and screening are clearly within our jurisdiction, and that if we go much beyond that, it's going to get A, very complicated, and B, probably maybe walking in somebody else's regulatory turf. Other comments, concerns?
Maybe question for staff. I know we're trying to codify something that is not in the code right now because it's easier to regulate it afterwards, but how large of an issue do you consider it to be? Like, is it something you have to deal like so often that I'm trying to evaluate if we're picking apart something that isn't huge?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily been an issue very often, but definitely given some of the larger developments and just in general, a lot of the different home improvements that occur where people have air conditioning equipment and possible backup generators. It is something that's looked at on a fairly regular basis. I don't think there's been too much in the way of an issue, say, between neighbors with the location of a generator or any kind of disagreement along those lines. But it is something that has come up. And we noticed that it's not actually regulated.
So not regulated, so now, if a generator is proposed, the building inspectors treat it as though it was an air conditioner.
Essentially, there are a few more, at least from the electrical inspector's perspective, there are a few more things that he takes a look at specifically,
Okay.
but they are permitted the same.
Okay.
Can you, if I missed this, sorry, what's the difference between the proposed generator ordinance or requirements and air conditioning?
It's fairly small. The setbacks are pretty much the same, but we are allowing for an extra provision to allow for the zoning administrator to have a little bit more say in where the generator goes. And then also there's the, for the standby generators, the testing window.
The temporary, the portable issue wouldn't arise in the case of air conditioners, presumably. So that's a provision you may need here that you don't get by just using the air conditioner provision.
And do folks need to request permission or whatever it is to use a portable or temporary generator? Okay.
Well, there isn't a provision here for seeking. I mean, this would essentially be enforcement in response to complaint, yes?
Essentially.
You bring on a portable generator, your neighbor complains, you go take a look and say, you really ought to move this back another 3 feet.
Got it.
I think this may touch on temporary but longer uses, such as construction or anything that is, trailed in as opposed to something you take out of your garage that you would want. Like if somebody's building next door and they brought in something on a trailer that's big enough to be on a trailer, that's going to make some noise. It's not going to be there forever, but it's going to make some noise.
Sure.
Right.
Somebody want to offer a motion? Either to send it on to council or to send it back to staff?
I'll make a motion that we approve as presented with the exception of 6-4-6-10 under testing, that we expand the hours from 10 to 3 p.m., 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Second?
Okay, Pagotzi has moved, Goddard seconded, that we send the ordinance forward as recommended by staff with the exception of a testing window of 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Are there comments on the motion? If not, since this is going to council, we'll ask for a roll call.
All right. Commissioner Bilal? Commissioner Goddard?
Aye.
Commissioner Pagotzi?
Yes.
Commissioner Saul?
Aye.
Chair Ford?
Yes. 5 ayes, no nays. The motion is approved. The draft will be forwarded to council. All right. Case number 17, PLND 0031, a text amendment proposing establishment of responsibility for mailed noticing requirements for planning and zoning cases. Have at it.
All right. This text amendment actually is revisiting one that Plan Commission saw last year. That particular text amendment amended the zoning code and established the applicant's responsibility for mailed notice requirements for cases that had a mailed notice requirement of 500 feet and 1,000 feet from the actual property. That particular ordinance was approved by council in July of 2016. That essentially affected the processes for plan developments, major variations, special uses, substitutions of special uses, unique uses, zoning map amendments, and appeals from zoning administrative decisions. During that discussion, we did have some feedback regarding whether or not to include cases that required a 250-foot radius mailing. So there was some back and forth on that. We initially did not include that. But for this go-around, we are actually proposing to add those cases and have the requirement that the third-party mailing notice be used for those cases as well. So essentially, what we would be doing is adding similar language that was done for the previous cases, but we would also be adding an additional sentence where the city would reserve the right to provide those notices by first-class mail if the zoning administrator finds it necessary. So in some cases where the amount of mailings may be very small, or if there is a last-minute change where using a third-party noticing may take a little bit longer than just doing it ourselves, there might be cases like that where it would make more sense for the zoning administrator or the zoning planner to just go ahead and do those cases themselves. So that particular provision would affect the processes for minor variations and fence variations, as well as family necessity variations. So each of those cases requires a 250-foot mailed notice be sent out. So in addition to those particular changes, in the previous amendment or the ordinance that was approved, we did not have the provision that allowed for the zoning administrator, the zoning planner, to send out the notices if necessary. So we would also be amending the previously approved text amendment in order to add that provision in certain cases if necessary.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
So that would essentially change pretty much all of the cases that we have that require some kind of mailed notice. So for that, you have the same standards for approval of the amendment. That'd be whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive general plan as adopted and amended from time to time by City Council, whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property, whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties, and the adequacy of public facilities and services. And several of these don't actually apply since it's not an actual site project.
Thank you. I will ask if there are members of the public who wish to comment on this proposal. If none, then commissioners, questions and comments. Commissioner Bellisle.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Megan, could you put it in maybe a concrete example? Because it seemed obvious when you explained it, but I didn't get it. So
Oh, no problem.
Just an example of a time where you're like, oh, I wish we could just do it all ourselves or something. I just don't, I want to understand what we're being asked.
No, sure. For some of the smaller variations, like a fence variation, where you only have the 250-foot requirement for the mailed notice. If you have a larger lot and you may have something in an R1 district where you really are only sending out maybe 20 notices. In cases like that, it may make more sense and be a little bit faster, actually, for staff to just handle that mailing themselves. There may also be the case where there might be a last-minute change or update that requires us to go in and make an adjustment prior to an actual review of that project. Again, that may be something that's done a lot faster by staff versus going back and forth with the third party to get approve the proof, have them prepare everything, and then send it out.
Commissioner Saul? Do we have any idea? Well, I guess I've got two questions. How has the system worked over the last year? Oh, I'm sorry, it was your light.
That was
I
my
thought it was-
question, so go for it.
Oh, okay. I saw a light and I just picked a name. How's it worked?
Well, first I'll say it hasn't been quite a year. We did some negotiations. We ended up going with the Blueprint Shop, which has a location in Evanston. So they have been handling the mailings. So far, we've not had any issues, and it's gone pretty efficiently. So we're looking to continue that process and expand the use where we can.
Do we have any sense of what it might cost? Let's say that I have to do a fence amendment. I'm in a neighborhood of half lots, and I'll come back to that. What's it going to cost me to send out a 250-foot radius notice? Do you have any idea?
I actually have an example. I double-checked with our zoning staff who does the majority of these mailings. The range is anywhere from 30 to 75 mailings most of the time, with the average right now being about 45 mailings that go out. The contract that we worked out with the Blueprint Shop essentially provides the notices for 70 cents per mailing.
Okay.
So the cost is relatively low. What adds an additional cost is for most of these cases, there are two mailings that go out. So the first is basically a general notification that a case is happening. And then the second is once a case is decided, that is sent out to those same individuals, letting them know of that decision. So if we have the two mailings plus the application fee, which at this point is $250, that would be a little over $300. So the example I have with the 45 mailings is about $313.
250 base fee,
That's the application fee.
yeah, and then another 60 plus or minus. Okay.
So that may increase or decrease depending on essentially the location of the property. So if there's something that may be adjacent to the downtown or is in downtown where you have to send out something to a building with condominiums,
Right,
that can
yeah.
change the price.
Okay. Now, under the current provisions, the 500,000 foot, are we sending postcards or are we sending first class?
It's been postcards. There have actually been cases where we've sent the first class
Okay.
as well.
Other questions or comments?
For the 250-foot radius, you called out minor variations and fence variations. Are those the only circumstance? Is that the only time this 250-foot radius applies, or are there other?
There's the family necessity variation as well. That is, exactly, as an
Essentially.
example I used, should there be a household where someone has a sudden illness or a sudden disability, and they require a ramp or special changes to be made to the house, then that would be family necessity.
And that would fall under this?
Right.
So one potential concern I have is just shifting costs to maybe a household who, it might be a lot for them just to pay the $250 application fee, and then adding a cost for maybe a small change to their home might be an additional burden that I don't know is entirely fair. I don't know if that would fall under some discretion, but that's one concern I have.
That's definitely a valid concern, and that I think was actually brought up with the initial amendment that we did. So,
But presumably that would fall within the zoning administrator's discretion. Could look at a situation and say, you know what, in this case, we're going to mail it.
it could.
I don't expect to wear this rock down in the 7 months that I have left, but I'm going to try one more time. When we considered this a year ago, I said, and I will say again, that I think for minor variations and fence variations, 250 feet is excessive. In my situation, if I want to move a fence 3 feet, I have to notify people 7 houses away. That seems to me to be overkill. But that question isn't before us.
That,
The question is, if I want to do that, do I have to do the mailing?
that could be a question that we look at down the line, if the commission would like to look at that.
If you do, I'll come back as a member of the public and testify. Okay, any other comments on this one?
Yes, and I don't know if the place, just to go back to the point for households where it might be a burden for them to, I don't know if the I would like it to be explicit so that someone who is thinking about this process knows it and doesn't have to come into the office and talk to someone before so I don't know if it follows some other programs where there's an income limit and it's explicit what that bar is, but I just like that to be more clear to folks and just put some thought into that.
Okay, so essentially have some provision for financial
However, the city,
hardship.
yeah.
Okay.
Would that be a discretionary? I mean, do you want language to the effect that, where do we say, the city reserves the right to provide the aforementioned notice by first-class mail where the zoning administrator finds it necessary? I mean, do you want to include language like the zoning administrator may consider household income? I mean, how explicit do you want to be?
That could work. But then I think, so I don't know that the ordinance is a place to do it, but that there is some standard, so it's not the zoning administrator's like, I like you, or you know, like it's applied fairly and uniformly, that hardship exception. So I don't know that the ordinance would be the place to get into that level of detail, but yes.
I hate to see something like that in an ordinance, although I'm sensitive to that subject. I think the language where the zoning administrator finds it necessary covers that.
So the place could be maybe on the application. I don't know. So however it's exercised, I think it's important that it's clear what the standard is and that it's applied uniformly, and I guess what qualifies as a hardship or low income is not at the discretion of the zoning administrator. So, like I said, I don't know that the ordinance is the right place. Maybe it is a statement on the application, but.
The application might be a good place to put that, because I'm also wondering if we have that there, having to have certain requirements for, or metrics for measuring what the hardship actually is. And what that would need to be. That would probably be a,
I mean, the city
Deeper
has, I think, for like beach
conversation. Yeah.
tokens, I don't know. I'm sure the city for other programs and city services has exceptions or reduced, right? There's a definition for that. So it's probably the same standard. Like I said, it doesn't have to be in the ordinance, but I just would like it to be clearly stated.
So in whatever, we can attach that provision as sort of a sense of the commission as we send this forward to council, assuming we're going to send it forward.
Yes.
Okay, okay. The record needs to be real clear on this one then. Okay, then are there other comments or concerns on the proposal as staff has presented it?
I had one comment. I mean, I agree with the sentiment, but if someone is going for a zoning ordinance, the cost of mailing is a pretty small percentage of what normally if someone is going, it needs to install an air conditioner or, well, I suppose there could be instances where the ask
Put in a ramp.
or putting in a ramp, but those are, those tend to cost a bit of money, and the cost of the mailing is really not, I can't see where that would really break somebody in a,
If you have,
That could be
if you
covered
have
by a
limited
different
income,
program.
it could break you,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so
Yeah.
maybe you don't apply at all, and that's another problem. But
Yeah.
if you have limited income, it is a problem.
And the actual cost of the item or whatever might be covered by some other program, but the mailing and the
sure,
filing fee is
okay.
not.
No,
so.
okay, I get it.
Other comments or questions? Does someone want to make a motion? Come on, folks.
I'll make a motion to, how do we word this? To accept the ordinance as proposed with this, well, hang on, time out. Let me back up a minute. Would we need to see language prior to approving it again? No. All right.
No, no.
Okay.
I would say using standards that
No,
are used in
I mean,
different
if
other
we're-
programs from the city.
If we're
Okay.
stating what our sense of a need is, we're sending it forward to council, and council will say, yeah, we agree, and ask administration to do something, or it won't.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Should I try it again?
So the motion is to,
Motion is to approve as presented with the added provision of having a mechanism to recognize financial hardships for the cost of the mailing.
and that's a sense of the commission rather than a specific change to the proposal as it's put in front of us.
Yes.
Okay. So the proposal, as it is put in front of us, would be recommended to council with this additional recommendation from the commission. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Saul, all right. Comments on the motion? If not, again, this is going to council, so we'll do a roll call.
all right. Commissioner Bilal, Commissioner Goddard,
Aye.
Commissioner Pagotzi,
Yes.
Commissioner Saul,
Aye.
Chair Ford.
Aye. 5 ayes, no nays. The motion is approved. The recommendation will be sent forward to council. I think we should recognize the presence of the mayor. Good evening. Nice seat you have here.
I haven't really sat in it very
Oh, really? All right. Case number 17, PLND 0030, a proposed zoning text amendment regulations to establish staff authority to determine the front yard of a parcel.
Okay. So this is an item that came about from an aldermanic request. So I will start with what the current regulations are. Very generally speaking, the front lot line and following the front yard is determined by the owner. And this becomes very important on certain through lots or if you're on a corner lot, especially as it applies to placing fences or accessory structures, or if you have a larger development, and trying to figure out where certain setbacks need to be in relation to their effect on neighbors. So the proposed amendment is fairly simple. We would establish the zoning administrator's authority to determine that front lot line for corner lots, and that would be giving consideration to any existing improvements that are on that lot and the proportions of the lot line dimensions, as well as the pattern of existing development that is within that neighborhood or on that block. Pretty straightforward, some general guidelines for how that would be determined. And we would also do a minor change to the definitions that would show that the authority for that determination would be for the zoning administrator. You've got similar standards for improvements as we had for the previous amendments. Whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Comprehensive General Plan as adopted and amended from time to time by the City Council. Whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of existing developments in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. Whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties and the adequacy of public facilities and services. So with that, I will open it up to any questions or comments.
Again, is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this proposal? If not, commissioners?
Does this apply to lots where there are existing structures, if they're corner lots?
It would, yes.
And is there a grandfathering in, or might a property owner find themselves having to change something because this ordinance is passed?
There would be consideration for what's already there. So in a sense, there could be some grandfathering in. We'd have to take a look at what was considered the front lot line or the front yard of the property for a certain amount of time in the past. So that would definitely be a consideration. If there is something that is new proposed to be built, then we may have to do some additional consideration if they want to, say, put a shed in or do something along those lines.
I don't know. Can you give maybe a couple examples? I'm just trying to understand where this is coming from and what the potential impacts are. But it seems like if I were an existing property owner and you told me my front, what I was considering, what has always been treated as my front lot is no longer, and I would have, I don't know if that would necessitate changes to my property. That would be problematic for me. So I'm just trying to understand potential impacts of this.
I definitely understand where you're coming from. Again, this is where the provision where we look at existing structures on the lot and take a look at the history for that particular property. If a particular property has had a configuration for some amount of time and the front lot line and the front yard has been the same for however many years or however long a period of time, then we would probably end up going with what has been consistently decided. And that tends to be what zoning staff does. We try to be consistent in how we review the items and interpretations. So you wouldn't want to all of a sudden flip where a front yard is if it's not been considered that way at all.
Well, now, am I correct? This is not a decision that you would be making sort of unprovoked. I mean, isn't it the case that if the owner of a corner lot comes in and asks for a zoning variance to build a shed, and the shed is permissible in the side yard and not in the front yard, at that point, you have to look at it and make a determination. If there's nothing else on the lot that tells you which is the front and which is the side, then it's in response to a particular request that you would make a decision, this is the front, this is the side.
So it is likely that a house on a corner lot would already have one of those sides be the front by usage over time.
By usage, by
Right.
setbacks, by whatever.
It looks like it's intended to. This comes up a lot, more than I would imagined, more than I would have imagined that it does come up. It does come up. And just what was a front yard, 50 years ago, just sometimes evolves and it's not really much of a front yard anymore, or, the primary entrance is used on the side yard. And the way I read it, it looks like it's trying to be more helpful to the property owner to allow the zoning administrator to have, to give them a little more flexibility to address any particular need that might arise if you're adding a ramp or an air conditioner or a shed, if it's that. So I'm reading this as just giving the city staff more flexibility to help various property owners. Now it's definitely going to be a case by case, but just to allow a little more flexibility in making that, because making a determination, because sometimes it can be pretty arbitrary on what the front yard is. I mean, I can think of a few corner lots, and it's not real obvious. So I would hope that that's the intent. One could always ask for a variance or an appeal, but I think it's a good tool. It's a good adjustment based on what some of the little things I've been through. My sister owned a corner lot, and it was, we needed to redo the stairway on the back of it, and needed to encroach on the front yard, and it really wasn't
the intent is just, it's not clear to me, and it seems like it could also be, even if the intent is to be more flexible to help property owners, it could also be used to place additional restrictions on property owners. So I guess the way it's written, it seems like that is a possibility, even if it's not the intent of the ordinance.
And that was my concern as I looked at it, that it seemed to me we had a possibility here of leaning over too far in the direction of the neighbors. That under the current regulations, if there's nothing that makes that has established which is the front yard, the homeowner gets to decide, this is my front yard, this is my side yard. And what this does, and I understand, I'm sorry Mario isn't here, I understand that there is a case now in court in which a homeowner made essentially that determination and a neighbor didn't like it, which is sort of predictable. And essentially what this does is, I'm concerned, put the zoning administrator in the middle of that situation of making that determination. Now, it's going to end up, if you've got a neighbor who wants to go to court, it's going to court. I come back again to the question of administrative discretion. You've spoken of giving consideration to existing improvements so that if there's something on the lot that already, in effect, establishes 1 yard as the front yard, then that's to be considered. And proportions of the lot line dimensions, I'm not sure what that means, and pattern of existing development. Are those three provisions sufficient in our mind to constrain the administrator's discretion on this?
Or maybe in other words, are they defendable?
Well, and are they defensible? The person who could tell us that isn't here tonight.
In that specific language, when we're talking about any existing improvements on the lot, is improvements the right word as more of existing? I'm trying to find the right word, but if you have kind of the formal, maybe older than older home, formal entrance in the front, but side entrance on the other side, it's more the day-to-day. The front probably would be determined as the more formal part of it, and that's not necessarily an improvement, it's just an existing, all I can think of is existing condition, but that's another debate.
Well, go back to the prior discussion. If you have a corner lot and the 2 yards are essentially the same size, you can't choose between one of them as being more predominant than the other. But on one side, there is an existing air conditioning unit, 8 feet back with screening. Doesn't that automatically define that as the side yard, since
It'd make
an
your
air conditioner would be illegal in the front yard?
Essentially.
So that would be a matter, that would be one of the existing improvements to which you would have to pay attention. I mean, in effect, the side yard would have been defined, and the homeowner can't come along and say, oh, wait a minute, that's my front yard. Because once you do, then you're in violation of the ordinance with respect to the air conditioner. Yes?
When you, assuming that it was installed while it was coded, the air conditioner would have had to be put on what is the side yard.
So somebody would have had to make a determination at that point, which
Correct.
was the front yard.
That's my understanding of it.
Okay, yeah.
I was trying to accommodate what Commissioner Fregosi was saying, that uses of yards have kind of changed over time. I'm thinking of my neighborhood, and a lot of single-family homes that are in my neighborhood are corner lots kind of have one, what I would consider the front historically, may not be used as the front anymore, other than being very formal and very pretty, but you park on the side or you come in the side door. I think that's what he meant, but I certainly understand the improvements part, that if you've made that determination already, then that's it, you're done.
Yeah. Well, what's your pleasure, folks?
One, and I don't know how formal this comment can be, but certainly will need to be very well explained when it gets to City Council, so that it doesn't seem like we're taking away homeowners' powers in any way. Just paying extra attention to the explanation.
So,
That is my concern.
so that actually speaks to what I was going to say. I think that if the ordinance as written requires additional explanation, then the ordinance needs to be rewritten, because we won't always have the same city council. The zoning administrator might change, so the intent at this point in time is one thing, but if the language allows something else, then I think it needs to be, I want to say more specific, and I'm not saying list every single circumstance under which, right, the zoning administrator would consider this, but I think that it just seems too broad right now. I'm not comfortable approving this or even voting on it because it just seems very open-ended. It says that they would give consideration to existing uses, but also the pattern of existing development in the neighborhood. So even if I'm using a certain side as my side yard, if the neighborhood isn't, I don't know, it just seems too broad and not very clear. And so I would recommend having staff take another look and kind of clarifying some of this language.
Do we want them to take another look at this? I mean, is this a problem here? I'm having a hard time figuring out why we should be deciding this.
Oh, at all?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, without
that's
that,
another question. Do we really need this?
that's kind of dawning on me. Why are we, I mean, there is a process of amending, of going in for an amendment, and then you have to pay the mail service and all that good stuff. But, I mean, there is if there is truly a problem for somebody, and you just have to go and amend it, your property, and change the definition of your front yard. And at least there's a due process instead of leaving it up to the administrator.
Or putting the administrator in the middle of potential
yeah,
dispute.
yeah.
Well, there is that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Saul, was that a motion to send this back to staff and ask them to take one more look before we act on it?
It was.
Is there a second?
So moved.
Second, Pagotzi seconds. All right, the motion is to send this back to staff and ask them to have another look at it. Bearing in mind the discussion you've heard. Comments on the motion? I think since this is going back to staff, we can do this on a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
One nay. All right. Staff, we'll wait to hear from you.
If there's any additional direction, it would be appreciated to go back and take a look at it. There's certainly codes that would just say wherever the front door is facing, that's the front yard, or codes that say whatever's a narrower side, that's the front yard. So if there's, if they want something, if the intent is to have something that's certain in every case and not allow any discretion, that would be one thing staff could look at. If there are additional factors you want staff to consider when determining which is the front, that would be something else to consider.
I'd say in the interest of, as you, Scott, the administrator, trying to give you a little more guidelines on, I think, how to establish your authority so that also a homeowner knows a little bit more of what you're basing it on, maybe beefing up a little bit the authority part of it, for lack of a better word, would be my recommendation to staff and for that one.
Yeah, I hear less concern here about specific standards than about the lack of, I mean, the need for tighter standards, and you can bring us tighter you can bring us the standards you think are appropriate.
So in other words, instead of any existing improvements, list the type of improvements that would fall under the.
And if, it seems to me that if this were to take the form, I'm not sure that we want to, I mean, maybe we want a laundry list in the ordinance, but even if we had, if we can establish a record that says, here are the kinds of things we're concerned about, so that when you come to enforcement, you've got the language of the ordinance, but you've also got our record, maybe that would be sufficient. Run that past Mario.
Yeah, I was the goal of this isn't clear to me, so it's hard to say what specific items should be in it. So, so that's why I don't have a laundry list, but I do think that some tightness around this would be helpful. But it's not clear what the goal of this is.
It came to us on an aldermanic reference.
Yeah, right.
Is it somebody that's still on council?
The goal is out there somewhere. The last item we have before us, an item for discussion on the establishment of regulations for the use of drones. Talk to us.
I don't have a presentation for this. However, there is an ordinance that is being drafted that will come before council, I believe, May 22nd, that will establish guidelines, regulations for the use of drones. We don't have specific language as of yet, but it will address concerns over, I believe, privacy, where the drones can be used, allowable heights, and things of that nature. I believe this was an item that was also referred to Plan Commission from council. But at this point, the actual use of drones is not within the purview of the zoning code. So it's more so of an FYI. Or if there are any general questions that you have that you may want to have the legal staff consider as they're drafting the ordinance, we can take that back as well.
You say in your memo, existing regulations regarding aviation apparatus in public parks and prohibition on the use of model airplanes
Yeah.
are found within Title VII Public Ways and Title IX Public Safety. And presumably, the new ordinance governing drones would be, those would be the logical places in the code to put those to?
Presumably so, yes.
Okay. I have a hard time seeing a land use implication here. I mean, I doubt that we would want to say, well, you can use drones in R1, but not in R5. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. Comments, commissioners?
I agree with you.
Certainly agree with your comment that you just had. Maybe something that could be interesting if it becomes relevant as this gets drafted is to refer to specific heights or zones if we want to talk even about heights, but it just doesn't seem to be within our jurisdiction. And in general, and that's a personal comment, very difficult in a densely built city like Evanston. It's just not the place to have a drone.
I've had one across the street from me in a schoolyard, but
But then maybe more on how high these things can go, because you can buy the toy ones that I'm sure somebody could want to have fun with that goes up to 30 feet or 20 feet.
Sure.
And that's a lot less noisy or bothersome than the giant real ones.
Yeah.
But again, not a zoning issue.
As a side note, I've seen them used to track construction progress. So, I mean, I can see the use for them, but I do agree that it's not a plan commission or a land use issue.
And if in the course of council's consideration, this would not be the first time when council adopted an ordinance which didn't appear to have a land use implication, and then it turned out it did, and it came back to us, and we can deal with that.
I do have, but the ordinance is not coming to plan commission, though.
No.
No. Okay. Your Honor, do you want to say anything to us before you leave?
I would. Good evening, Chairman Ford and Commissioners. I just wanted to issue a big thank you for what you guys do, for the thoughtfulness and the seriousness in which you discuss these issues, for raising, basic questions about what is the problem that we're solving. I think that's always a fundamental question that we ought to ask anytime we're passing an ordinance or considering an ordinance or making a change to something. So just, on behalf of me, Steve Haggerty, as a resident and in my new position as mayor of this wonderful city, thank you. You know, you are bringing a lot of talents and expertise and seriousness to this commission, and it makes me feel really good, and I know it makes others in this community feel good, because the decisions and the recommendations that you guys are making ultimately to the city council, some of which become laws around here, affect people's, you know, lives, right, and their properties, as well as development in this community. And I don't know how often people get up here and thank you, but I just wanted to do that before I have to leave to go to my next meeting. So it was a pleasure to spend some time with you here this evening, and thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
You're the first.
Yeah.
Well, how about that? Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, is there any public comment? Sir?
Yeah, I didn't sign my name out front, but I'll introduce myself. My name is Ken Jones. I moved into Evanston just in the last couple of weeks and thought I'd come by, just see government in action, and I am impressed as well. I had a couple questions that I thought I wouldn't interject in the process before, but when you are establishing the front street, the front of a house, does that impact the address of that property, the street address?
Might be a factor to
Or
consider.
if I may, in the other way, is the address more likely to be the front yard?
It's an interesting question.
Right? Because if it does,
Don't think it would change it.
well, then the responsibility for deciding the street address of your house, you probably don't want that to be in the zoning committee, because that has impact on the property value, all sorts of things, right? Okay, just
Yeah, that's a good
thought I
question.
had.
No, but it could be, it could be one of the factors that we put in to clarify.
Sure. Yeah.
Second comment, excuse me, I think the weather's got my voice here, but on the drone issue, I was at Starved Rock State Park over the weekend, and there was a young couple there with a very noisy drone taking selfies of themselves. Lifting the drone up, taking pictures with the river and stuff behind them. So drones are here to stay.
Yes. And they are not all as quiet as we might wish.
No, this was pretty noisy too, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Jones, thank you. Welcome to Evanston.
Thank you.
Anything else? Staff, anything we need to know?
Yes, on June 27th at 5 p.m.
Good.
CMAP will be hosting a meeting regarding their On to 2050 plan. We'll be sending out more information about it in the coming weeks as we obtain that information. But that will be in the Parasol Room again, June 27th at 5 p.m. And you will all be receiving invitations to that. It's also multi-community, so it's not just going to be Evanston. There's several other communities that will be invited.
And so far as we know, our next meeting is June 14th. And agenda at this point uncertain?
Uncertain.
Okay.
You got,
Okay.
Davis Street project
Is there a proposal in for the Davis Street project? Is there an application yet for Davis and Sherman or Chicago?
We don't have a new application.
Okay, you don't. All right.
Just a rendering.
Okay, if there is no business to come before us, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Goddard, seconded. Belisle. All in favor of adjourning? Aye. Opposed? None. We are adjourned. Thank you all.